Here we have an elevation that was drawn by hand and scanned into Photoshop, and we are ready to get started rendering. So the first thing we want to do is start a new layer. Actually, we want to keep our background layer pristine and not drawn on in any way, so that we can always go back and use it for reference whenever we need to. So by right-clicking next to background, you can go to duplicate layer. The first thing we're going to do is add windows, so I'm going to name this next layer Windows. And it is a duplicate layer, so if I were to turn off the background, it looks exactly the same. I have a copy of the same thing on top of itself. So stay on Windows. Next we need a view of an exterior, something that's visible through the glass. You could do an image search for something that you like, or if you have actual site photos, this would be a great time to use them, especially if your client spent a lot of money getting a site with a beautiful specific view. You would definitely want to include that in your rendering. So I have a photo right here, which I'm going to drag into my elevation. So use the top icon, drag it over, just click and drag, hit OK. And it comes in on its own layer. And I'm going to rename it Exterior. Next thing I want to do is change the scale. So making sure I'm on Exterior, I go to Edit, Transform, and Scale. Hold down the Shift key so that you can change the, so that it doesn't change the proportions. It's constrained. And when you get something that looks about right, you can hit OK. We can always go back and change it later on. So now what I'm going to do is take the exterior, I'm going to pull it beneath Windows. There we go. Then make Windows active. I'm going to zoom in, and what I need to do is delete any of the area that's glass in my elevation. So using my rectangular marquee tool, delete, just going to select and delete, leave my mullions, leave everything except for the glass. That's the only part that I want to get rid of is the glass. There we go. All right, now I can use my move tool, making exterior active, to move this around to something that I like. And I think I need to make it just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Scale, holding down Shift. I think I might, it would be nice to see a little bit of the water. Let's see, how about, actually I like seeing the sky. Yeah, I think I'm going to actually do a little something like that. I can always go back and change it later and hit return. Now going back to the Windows layer, I'm going to turn off exterior for a moment. I'm going to use my magic wand to select the empty areas. And in fact, probably be a good idea to turn off background layer 2 for a moment. What I'm going to do is fill these with a very light blue to make them look like glass. So can go to my color picker. This might be a little green. I'm going to move this, something like that. Looks pretty good to me. Then I'm going to pick for my background color. I'll use my dropper to get to the same color again and just go with something a little bit darker. Maybe like that. So they're very similar. Now I'm going to go to my to my paint bucket tool and the gradient tool, and I want to go from the light blue to the dark blue. Right now the opacity is at 100%, and I think I'm going to put that down to about 20% and see how that looks. And go from one corner to another, and now I can turn exterior back on to see how that looks. I think that looks pretty good. Next, what I want to do is put in some white highlights. So I'm going to click on the black and white and then switch them. Then go to my brush tool, opacity, I'm going to bring down a little bit. And I'm going to, oh, that's way too much. Let's make it down further. About like that. That looks pretty good. Now let's change Sorry, that's not what I wanted. Change the brush size. Remember, the magic number is, of course, 3, just like always for glass. I want to have 3 stripes that are differently spaced from each other, and also different sizes from each other, so they're not looking like stripes. That looks good, and then let's do maybe a smaller one. Something about like that. Looks good. And I can also play around with my exterior layer to change the opacity if I feel like it's maybe just a little too strong. We'll see what happens as we are adding other layers and adding things going on in the background, see what we think about how it looks.